Hi, my name's Tim Schaff, and I'm the pastor at Marysville Christian Reformed Church. Welcome to Wednesday's Word. This is the first episode, and our goal is to understand God, and the best way to do that is by reading His Word. It's amazing how many people, not just Christians, ignore the Bible. We've got it on our shelves, we refer to it on Sundays or when we're in an argument with somebody about a Christian or a political thing, but very rarely do people pick it up and read it on a daily basis. So our goal is to get as many people starting that habit as possible. The tool many of us will use is the audio Bible, daily audio podcast, where they read a section from the Old Testament, New Testament, Psalm, and Proverb every day. And you can read it yourself, you can listen to the narrator read it for you, and that way you're getting a part of the Bible every day that you can think about. What I often do is I'll listen to it when I'm walking the dogs or running, and then if there's something that stood out to me, I'll get my Bible out or a Bible app and look up those words, because sometimes you listen to it so quickly that it's hard to remember exactly what you heard. And so what we'll do is answer questions that come up, and you can feel free to email those or talk to me about them. And then I'll also let you know some things that just jumped out at me. And the first thing that jumped out at me was how Psalms begins. Psalms is a collection of books or songs written by various people. And the very first one says, "Blessed is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord." And by law, they mean the books of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which is about most of the written scripture they probably had when this was written. So whoever has this book and meditates on it is blessed. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, who yields fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do is prospers. And so I wanted to share that because that's why we read the Bible, so that we can not just know the Bible, but to delight in God. And it's amazing how we delight in things that we watch them. If you're binge watching a show, you keep watching football. A friend of mine's a Canadian, and the Canadian team just lost to the American team, and she's wearing black and she's mourning, but her delight is in hockey and in Canadian hockey, and she follows it. They don't talk during the games. They meditate on hockey, and it fills parts of their heart. The only thing that can fully fill our hearts is God, and that's why we delight in Him and want to meditate on His Word. And so as questions come up, don't be embarrassed. Many people don't have questions about the Bible because they haven't read it deeply. If you've read the Bible deeply, you should have questions. There's some difficult to understand things. I've been studying the Bible in a formal way for about 30 years, and there's still things I scratch my head about and wonder if I'm really getting it right. That's why I read commentaries every Sunday. I listen to podcasts. I'm always asking questions of other theologically minded friends. If you think you've got God figured out, then you've probably watered God down just a little bit. So a few questions that came up, especially in Genesis. Genesis, the first couple chapters are called the primeval history. So from Genesis 1 through 11, you cover thousands or hundreds of years, depending on the time frame, between each chapter. And then once you get to Abraham, things start to slow down. But you have all of creation and the Tower of Babel and Noah's flood. All that gets packed into 11 chapters. And there's a lot to cover. And as one person was reading it, what they wondered was, who did Cain marry? And you go through the Bible, you've got Cain and Abel. They're the first people or sons. You have Adam and Eve, then Cain and Abel. Cain kills Abel. He runs out, has a wife. He's worried other people are going to kill him. What's going on around this? There's a couple theories. I don't want to tell you which one's the right one because I hold them all together. The goal is to be as biblical as possible without trying to figure everything out. As we get into the Bible, one thing to remember is the Bible's not written for you or to you. It's written for all of us. So it's not written to you, it's written for you. And so they're not going to answer every scientific or historical question. They didn't think in some of those terms when they were originally written. But it's written so that you can know God. And that's the overarching theme, and it's important to keep those themes in mind. But about Cain, a couple of things that come to mind. Adam and Eve had other sons, and they had children, and the live stream of humanity began to spread from there. And so it could be that Cain married a sister or a niece. That might sound gross. God does later make incest illegal and against the law, but early on there was no genetic mutation, so if Cain did marry a sister or a niece, there wouldn't be the inbreeding like we see in England in the Tudor dynasty and some of the things where it gets really sketchy. Those things weren't happening then. Another idea is that when God created humanity in Genesis 1, he created man and woman, female and male, he made them in his own image. Then the next chapter, he creates Adam and Eve. Some people argue that God created all of humanity, and then in the Garden of Eden, he created the representatives that would lead humanity. So Adam and Eve were set apart to say, you're the kings and queens of creation, and by your sinning, the rest of humanity can be brought down. I'm not sure about that one, but if that is the case, then that would explain easily how Cain had so many people around him. But you think about the lifespans they had then, how quickly humans were multiplying. My theory is more around the front one, but I wouldn't, die on that one. As you're reading Genesis, you have to realize that the goal is not to lay out history the way we think of history. The goal is to show who God is and how history holds together. So in Genesis 1, you see that on the first day, God creates light, but doesn't create the sun until the fourth day. On the second day, he creates dry land, but doesn't create plants until the fifth day. And so you have this weird interchanging where in the first 3 days, God forms. He forms separating light from dark, and then water from land, and then creates the sea and everything else. So in 3 days, he's forming places for people to live and things to live. And then the second 3 days, he's filling. So if the first day he forms the atmosphere, day 4, he fills the atmosphere with sun, moon, and stars. Day 2, he forms the sea. Day 5, he fills the sea and the air with birds and fish. And on day 3, if he forms dry land, on day 6, he fills dry land with all the animals and with us. And the reason they're showing that is because the purpose of God in creation isn't just to show that he can create an aardvark, although God can create an aardvark. The story is that God is pushing back chaos, and we are held together by his love. The natural state of entropy in the universe is chaos, with water and land colliding, darkness and light colliding, with no order to it. Which is why in the flood that comes up a few chapters later, it's not that God sat back and pulled the plunger and said, all right, let's go. And he's actively showing his wrath. If God separates land from water as a loving act, all he does in the flood is to step away from that and let natural causes take over. And so God's wrath, and in the flood it doesn't say that God's angry. It just says that he's regretting creating humanity, which is a whole question. How can God regret if he knew everything? It's probably a way of just talking in our own words about how God feels. I've used this quote in Sundays, but when the Bible is written, we can't fully understand God, so they almost have to use baby talk so that we understand. But in all this, God is not actively hating. He is pulling back and saying, okay, you didn't want to have life with me. This is what life with me looks like. There's no way that you can protect yourself from the flood that's going to come. And so those are the main questions that came up from other people and that I noticed this past week. If you have others, feel free to reach out. We're going to continue through Genesis. Right now we're getting into the call of Abraham. So this coming week, that's what we'll be reading. We'll continue with the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew. If you have any questions, my email is pastortim@cascadecrc.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Talk to you next week.